All right. Well, Penny, welcome to Dying to Tell You, the Caring Perspective. So I think you probably know, but normally, Dying to Tell You, I interview people who are actually dying, who are coming to the end of their life, and we talk a little bit about their diagnosis and kind of how it's changed the way that they're living. And I often say that these people that I work with are my greatest teachers. You know, I learn a ton, and it has changed the way that I live my life. It's changed the way that I practice as a chaplain. And so this is just an opportunity for some of the other people that I know who do this kind of work to talk about the things that they've learned from doing this kind of work. So yeah, maybe you can introduce yourself and tell us where you are, and then yeah, we'll go from there.
Sure. So my name is Penny Smith, and I am a certified hospice and palliative care nurse. I've been a hospice nurse for about 20 years. I've worked in inpatient hospice care centers. That's actually where I got my start in hospice. I've been a home hospice case manager. I've worked in education, regulatory, and currently I'm a quality assurance nurse. I'm getting close to retiring, so I work from home 3 days a week. My home is in a cabin off the grid in the mountains. Something that was kind of came to fruition through my work, and knowing that life is short, we need to grab the bull by the horns and do what we want to do to check off all the things on our bucket list. So I am also a social media influencer, and I started on TikTok, and I'm on Instagram, social media, and Facebook, normalizing death and dying, talking about my experiences to help other people understand the dying process so that they have less fear and anxiety about it.
Yeah. And you're a Hospice Nurse Penny on TikTok, I know, is Instagram, everywhere else. You're
Yeah,
same
Hospice Nurse
Hospice Nurse
Penny.
Penny,
Mm-hmm.
and that's where we met. And I was on your podcast, and now you're doing my podcast. And anyway, thank you for being here. So, yeah, tell us a story. How have you grown and changed by doing this work?
So people ask me often, do I remember the first patient that I cared for
Hmm.
who died? And I don't. I cannot
Oh,
remember.
really?
I've
Yeah.
cared for thousands of dying people, and I don't remember the first one. But I remember the first one who really impacted me. Before I went into hospice, I had a lot of death anxiety. I had never seen a dead person. I had never really had anybody close to me die. I wasn't close to my grandparents. My cousin, who I was somewhat close to, had died by suicide. But other than that, I didn't know anything about the dying process. It was completely foreign to me. And I was working in a hospice care center, and my patient was elderly, an elderly lady, and her daughter was a nun. And so there were a lot of nuns who were visiting her, coming and going all the time. And one evening, it was a Sunday evening, I was at the nurse's station by myself, and the last visitor left her room, and she was a nun. And she walked up to me and she said, "She's gone." And I said, "Oh." And I stood up and I grabbed my stethoscope, and she said, "No, no, no. She's still here doing the work of dying, but her spirit has left. You can see it in her eyes." And I was just like, "What?" And so after she left, I went into the room, and the woman was laying in the bed and she was facing away from the door. So I had to walk around the bed to see her. And sure enough, her she had this like gaze. Her eyes were
Hmm.
just
Hmm.
unfocused. Her neck was hyperextended, which we see often when a person is dying. And she was just looking off into the distance, and you could see that she wasn't seeing anything. And it was so profound to me. And I, I, to this day, every time I've seen that, and I've seen that a lot because that's what people look like when they're dying, I always feel like, okay, the spirit is gone and the body is here doing the work of dying. And it was especially profound for me because I had no religious upbringing. I had no concept of an afterlife whatsoever. I worried that there's nothing after we die. And then seeing that, it really changed how I view death and dying, but not only that, how I view the afterlife and my belief that there is something more and that the spirit really does check out, and the body is still here doing that work of dying.
Hmm. That's so, I mean, yeah, thank you for sharing that. It's a great story. It just, yeah, as a person that had death anxiety, did that it probably didn't take care of it right away, but did that, was that an experience that was soothing for you or like helpful?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Yes. I mean, I think my death anxiety relieved pretty quickly after I started working in hospice. Just being around dying people and just, honestly, I just really feel like getting to a place of acceptance of death is the key
Mm.
to getting over death anxiety because it just takes the power out of it.
Yeah.
Once you
Yeah.
get to that place of, yeah, it's going to happen. It is what it is. And I cannot control that. That
Right.
really helps. But for me, also that extra layer of worrying, like, what if there's nothing after we die? You know, um, that type of that, along with deathbed visioning, because I have seen people deathbed visioning, those things really helped that. Like I said, form this idea of what I believe happens after we die.
Yeah.
And fun fact about that story is that I when I first got onto TikTok, I was doing dance trends and stupid stuff. I was not
Right. Right. Right.
doing, like death education.
Hmm.
But then I told that story and it went viral. And then that I started getting all these followers. And then that was what made me realize that this was an area of conversation that people wanted to have. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
so,
It really
but
is true. I think a lot of people really, I think they have that kind of anxiety about it, but they want to have that conversation so that they can get past that anxiety.
true, true. And I didn't realize that either. I never knew that death anxiety is even a thing and that people have it and that it's very, very
Hmm.
common and normal. And until I got on TikTok and people started commenting all the time that they had a fear of death. And I see it all the
Right.
time still. And then I also see
Sure.
people saying that learning about it, watching my videos has alleviated that for them. So it's just really helped to kind of, um, you know, um, reinforce the idea that the more that you're able to talk about death and dying, the less you'll have fear around it.
Yeah, for sure. I think this would be really interesting for people if you're willing to share. If you're not, you can just say pass. But as somebody that grew up with no religious framework for, an afterlife, I'm sure there was some, like cultural stuff that you got growing up. But as somebody that didn't have that, didn't own that kind of framework, and having the worry that nothing happens, and then having this experience that has really changed the way that you view the afterlife, would you talk a little bit about that, and then would you tell me what you think happens afterwards?
Sure. So yeah, my parents were, and they never talked about religion, agnostic or atheist. I don't even know. Maybe
Sure.
agnostic, I think. And I dabbled in churches on my own as a child. I was interested in churches, and religion is what really turned me off. I was just turned off by religion because my experiences weren't good with the religions that I, checked out. Um, and so, and I've never liked the idea of hell. I think it's horrible. I think it's just created to cause fear in people. And so I couldn't believe in heaven if I don't believe in hell. And I also didn't like the idea that you've got to believe a certain thing to get to heaven.
Yeah.
Um, so still wasn't willing to accept that as a part of afterlife as I started to develop a belief that there is something more. Also, I realized that nobody knows for sure what happens after we die, and we never will until we die. Um, so I could come up with what sounded good to me, and then that would be okay. That would placate me. But then what I started to see was, these, like I said, deathbed visions, where I'm sure you've seen people have
Yeah.
deathbed visions,
Sure.
and there's just nothing that can convince you that there's nothing there, right? Like
Hmm.
those people are seeing something, and they're seeing something. It's just very convincing. So that's the first thing, and then the spirit leaving the body, that's another part of that. But so I went through nursing school. I took chemistry. We learn about how nothing ever really goes away. It just changes its form. And then there's a lot of energy that's output through that, transformation. So I really started thinking that this is an energy thing, that these spirits, whatever, this is an energy thing. But what happened was about 5 years into my hospice practice, my dad died, and he came to me after his death.
Hmm.
And so I was sleeping, and he came to me, and he was energy. He was warm and bright orange energy, and he spoke to me. It was his voice. Um, and I just knew that this was not a dream. It wasn't a dream. I was sleeping, but it wasn't a dream. But it just confirmed that the idea that we are energy and that we continue in the form of energy. And I'm always growing in my thoughts about the afterlife.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And so I've kind of rejected reincarnation because my biggest fear was always what if there's nothing after this, and everything I've learned in life is just gone. It's meaningless. It doesn't mean anything anymore. I want to be able to hold my memories and the life that I lived. That's important to me, especially I've been through a lot, and so it's important to me, the growth that I've had. And so I rejected the idea of reincarnation because I thought if I was reincarnated, I don't remember my past life. So what good is that? But I was speaking with David from Dead Talks, who I know you know. I think were you on his podcast?
No, I haven't, but I know who he is. Yeah.
Yeah. So you need to be on his podcast. So we were having a conversation, and he talked about the idea that with reincarnation, your spirit does leave and you go out somewhere, and then you kind of decide that you're ready to go back and live another life. And the goal is you're always trying to kind of elevate yourself spiritually. You're always trying to kind of do better in each life, and you get to kind of choose the circumstances you maybe you're going back into, generally speaking. And then it's when you're out here after you've lived this life, that's when you have those memories and you retain that information. And so I really, it's kind of like that movie, What Dreams May Come, really. And that movie really resonated with me too. When that came out, I was like, oh, yeah, I love that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I, like I say, I always give the caveat. We don't know. I'm never trying to convince anybody because it's our own path. I'm happy to discuss my path. But that is kind of what I believe. I do think we retain our consciousness. I do think that, when my dad came to me, he said, it's time to go. And I thought he was saying it was time for me to go. And he said, no, it's not time for you to go. It's time for me to go.
Uh-huh.
And I felt like that was him saying he's leaving and now he's going wherever we go, right? Maybe he's going to be reincarnated. I don't know. But then my sister also had an experience with my dad a couple of years later. Her daughter was a meth addict, a meth and heroin addict, and she was pregnant. And spoiler alert, she is like 9 or 10 years clean and sober now.
Oh, okay.
Baby was born addicted, but went through a protocol and is fun, beautiful, fine little 9-year-old girl now. And so she was going through this horrible experience with her. She's her only child, and she had bought a house for her to rent. She paid for her phone, all these things, and she was knowing that she needed to do some drastic intervention, which included getting emergency custody of her niece. And she was suffering, and my dad, had been dead probably about a year or so, and she was really suffering. And her husband helped her to learn to meditate. And my sister is very atheist, like super not religious, doesn't believe in God. And so he was teaching her how to meditate, which really meditation is what? A form of prayer, right? And so she starts meditating and she sees my dad sitting on a bench with a dark figure. And she asks him, what do I do? I don't know what to do. And he said to her, you know what to do, Laura. And so she actually started having the strength to do what she needed to do, to evict my niece out of the house, to get emergency custody of my grandniece, her granddaughter, to do all these things. And she said each time that she meditated, my dad's image would fade more and more, and the dark image would remain.
Mm.
And to this day, she says, I believe in God now. I'm not religious. I'm not a Christian, but I believe in God. So it
Wow.
changed her. And then my mom had another experience. It's so interesting because these are three very different experiences that we had in my family. My mom, who I guess she's agnostic, doesn't believe in an afterlife, she says. I keep seeing these little wisps. What do you mean wisps? Oh, I don't know. Like I see something. And then I hear dad's voice and he'll say something to me like, be careful. And I'm like, wow, that's really interesting. Yeah, but it's not dad. It's not dad. I don't know what it is, but it's these little wisps. And so this went on for a while, and I asked her probably about a year ago. So, mom, and she would complain that my dad didn't come to her, even though she doesn't believe in an afterlife, mind you. Like, why did you have this experience? Why did Laura have this experience, but you never came to me? Oh, I believe it's because you're not open to receive that, right?
Mm.
But so I asked her, so mom, do you still have the wisps? And she goes, oh, I don't have them as much as I used to. And I said, well, what do you think that was? And she goes, well, I don't know. She goes, I don't believe in an afterlife. And I said, but you said you heard dad's voice. And she said, yeah. And I said, do you think it was dad? And she goes, well, yeah, I guess I do. And I said, well, then I guess you believe in an afterlife.
Yeah. Right. Right.
And then
Yeah.
my brother, and so this is my family unit. It's me, my sister, my mom, and my brother. This is the core of our family. My brother is a hardcore atheist. Absolutely believes there is nothing after this life. There is no God. We're done when we're done. Has never expressed any kind of experience at all with my dad after his death. And so I do think you have to be open to receiving that. And when my mom and my sister were asking me, like, why you? Why did he come to you first? I said, because I've been a hospice nurse for 5 years and I'm very connected to that.
Mm.
And I believe that there is something more. And I think that I was just more open to receiving it.
Yeah. Yeah. Uh, how's your brother with the death anxiety thing? Is he
has no
cool with it?
anxiety. No, yeah,
Yeah.
no issue, no issue.
Yeah.
People will ask me, like, do people who are atheists, when they're dying, do they have more fear? I've had some patients who were atheists who were fearful. I've had some who were not. I've had Christian patients who were fearful. I've had some who were not. I don't think
Totally.
religion plays any part of how people feel about death when they're at the very end of their life.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. I don't think it's one way or another. I think that some people find a lot of comfort in their religion, their faith. Some people, it creates a lot of anxiety and fear. So I think it
Yes.
is all really about how you do your work, whatever you want to call it, how you engage with all of that. So where are you at with God or
I believe
whatever,
in
something?
so I believe that there's a power greater than myself, and I'm sober, so that's something I learned through AA. Um, in it, and it's just undeniable. There are powers greater than myself. I have 10 inches of
Right.
snow and a tree down on my driveway today, so
Right.
I don't so, and I choose to call that power God. I think God is the creator. I believe that we came from the earth. We go back to the earth. We go back to the universe. And so I feel like that God is the creator of all of this. But I don't feel that God has any kind, and I think God is not like a being. It's everything. It's everywhere. It's everything. It's in the earth. It's in the air. It's all around us. And it's not like omnipotent in that it has the power to pull strings. I don't think that God can, heal. If somebody's healed from cancer, I don't think that's a miracle from God. I have trouble with that because I think that there wouldn't be things like child childhood cancer and child abuse and the horrible things that can happen, if God really had the power to stop that.
Sure.
Um,
Sure.
because I do feel like God is love and loving and not wouldn't allow that to happen if there was that power. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
No, totally. Totally. Um, yeah. Well, thank you for sharing all of that. And what I really appreciate most about all of it is that, well, one, I really appreciate that you aren't on some crusade to like make everybody believe the same thing that you believe. Um, and I really appreciate your openness to taking in whatever new information comes your way, right? Like you experienced that with that patient, and that made a difference and changed kind of who you are and how you see things. You had that experience with your dad, you accepted it, you took it for what it was, you let it change kind of who you are and how you are. And that I think is a wonderful quality. I want more of that for myself. You know, I want to be open to whatever comes and be learning and changing and growing. And I think, you know, doing this kind of work really lends itself to doing that. But I really appreciate you sharing all that.
I mean, what is life an experience if we can't learn and grow from it, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I was thinking about that this morning. I could live my life, you know, huddled down, being defensive and just holding on to what I have, or I could be open to experience what comes and grow and change and accept what is out there. So, um, a much more open and joyful experience if we can accept what comes at us. So,
Yeah.
yeah, thank you. All right. Well, tell us, you have a new book.
Yeah.
Plug it.
Oh, let me plug
Oh
my.
yeah, you got it.
Yeah, I
Show
got it
us.
right here. Yeah. Of course, it's going to be backwards on here. I
Oh no,
was
I
thinking,
see it. Well, maybe I don't
I
know.
need a
I think.
cover that has the reverse writing on it. Um, yeah, it's called Influencing Death: Reframing Dying for Better Living. It's a memoir, and it is about my journey to become a hospice nurse and my experiences with caring for dying people and how that has impacted my life. The story about the lady with the nun daughter is in here, and there's much more detail to that story in this book. It's available for pre-order. I don't know when your podcast is airing, but it
Oh
actually
yeah.
is going to be released on January 14th. It's available for
Oh okay.
pre-order now. And it's an ebook, audiobook that I narrated, and paperback, hardcover, everywhere you can buy books online.
Awesome. Is there a specific website for that, or just find you on social media, or?
So yeah, you can just go to any of the online bookstores, or
Okay.
you can go to my website, which is hospicenursepenny.com. And I do have a book page with all the links on there to everywhere that it's being sold.
There you go. Cool. How was your experience of recording the audiobook?
Oh my gosh, it was challenging. I was a little surprised at how difficult it was. I'm a singer. I've been a singer, and I make videos all the time. So I thought, well, this will be pretty easy, you know. And I like to read, and I'm a good reader. I'm
Right.
pretty
I know how to
articulate.
read. You would think I could do
Yeah, I
this.
know how to read, but boy, you know, for one thing, you're reading for hours and hours and hours.
Oh,
And
man.
the first thing I noticed was he had the iPad with the book kind of above the microphone so that there wouldn't be like a bounce back off the eye. So I was kind of sitting like this. And
Mm-hmm.
my neck was killing me after the first day. I thought, of all the things, I did not expect my neck to hurt after I was reading this book. But you know, it was an experience. But I'm glad that I did it. I'm a big consumer of audiobooks, and
Oh
ever
yeah, me
since I've
too.
been on TikTok, people have said to me they like my voice, and so I thought it's my story. I need to narrate it myself, and so I was really glad to be able to do it. But boy,
Yeah,
it was hard. It
that's
was hard.
great. I will get it on audiobooks. I'll listen to you. But we recorded with Julie McFadden, hospice nurse Julie. I think on a day after she had been reading all day long, and I was just like, "How are you doing this?"
Yeah,
Terrible.
Julie and I are really good friends. We've been friends since 2021. She got on TikTok a year after me and reached out to me right away and was like, "Hey, I'm sober and I'm a
Mhm.
hospice nurse," and we became fast friends. And she was texting me every day. We do voice text to each other all the time, telling me how hard it was. And she has a dyslexia. So I was like, okay, I know it's hard for her because she has a hard time actually reading. So
Right.
it's not going to be that hard for me, And then it was.
Wrong.
It was like, oh, okay, yeah, it's hard even if you can read the words forwards instead of backwards.
Right.
So yeah.
Right. Cool. All right. Well, thank you very much. Enjoy your snow day and stay warm.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you to Penny for sharing your story with us. Check the show notes for a link to Penny's website where you can find all the information about her social media, and how to order her book, Influencing Death. You can watch this and other episodes of Dying to Tell You, The Caring Perspective on our YouTube channel at DTTY Pod. Subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Thank you for listening. This is Dying to Tell You, The Caring Perspective.